Cool. I think are we live? Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So, shit, I never asked if I'm allowed to swear. That's okay. Yeah, so we're live. Welcome to DWF 16 panel. Don't read the comments. We're talking about political writing, which is very exciting. Before we kick off, though, I just wanted to do an acknowledgement of country. It's the first time I've done that digitally, so that's kind of cool. Very 2K16. Yeah, I'm on Wurundjeri country at the moment. I don't know where everyone else is, but I pay respects to elders past, present and future, and shout out to any mob who are listening right now. So actually I was going to introduce people, but I find it's much better when people introduce themselves. So if it's real cool with you guys, I might, we'll start off with Yaz, then Lane, then Gabrielle. If we can just, I'm assuming a lot of people may have read our bios, so if there's like a little something we wanted to share about ourselves.
Sure, I can get started. Thanks, Nika. So I'm Yasmin Majid, Sudanese born, sort of Arab, African, Australian. I think the relevance to kind of writing politically online and not reading the comments, my most recent experience would be accidentally picking a fight with a very famous American author. And that was probably my most kind of, I think, my most vehement engagement, let's say, with people who have opinions online. But I've been writing kind of online since I was been blogging since probably I was about 20, so about 5 years, I reckon, and just escalating, obviously, since then.
Accidentally picking a fight. I love that.
One way to become an international superstar.
That's it.
Lane.
So hi, I'm Lane Sainty. I work at BuzzFeed as a reporter there. I write mostly about LGBTI issues in Australia, sometimes other kind of politics or social affairs. And yeah, I guess I'm a really big user of Twitter. One of my rules for using Twitter is don't get mad online. I try really, really hard to not do that because I always end up more frustrated than I otherwise would be that day. But yeah, I have lots of thoughts about engaging with other people online, how you can do it in a way that both parties just feeling exceptionally angry for the rest of the day, which I think is what happens a lot of the time. And yeah, happy to be here.
It's Gabrielle. Is it Gabrielle?
Gabrielle.
Awesome.
Gabrielle, but you know, whatever. I'm actually on Gadigal country, so I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and the leaders past and present. I'm the opinion editor at Guardian Australia, so I do write, but most of the time I am also helping our writers deal with the comments. So I kind of think that that's been good for me, because before I was an editor, I used to take the comments so personally, but now I've got a different perspective, and I think that I am able to kind of filter through the comments that are just there to be plain nasty, and actually the ones that are disagreeing with me on a certain point. And I can take people disagreeing with me. I can handle that. It's just so hard to handle the plain nastiness.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that later.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So my name's Nika. I'm a Gunai Kurnai, Gunachmara, Wiradjuri and Yorta Yorta woman. In terms of my writing, apart from like things that no one ever read because it only ever stayed, someone's got their phone on.
Yes, sorry, I think it's me. It's hooked up to my computer. I'm just trying to turn it off.
How unprofessional.
Sorry, I know.
It's all good. Yeah, I never really wrote much. I always had like a lot of opinions that I would sometimes voice and whatever, and mostly been involved in activism. And then I had the opportunity to write earlier this year, and then just kept getting asked to write. And now I'm here as though I'm some sort of professional. I've scammed my way here. the first, like, also for those like tuning in, you can tweet questions that we'll get to at the end of the chat, end of the yarn. Tweet them using hashtag DWF16. Yeah, that'd be great. Participation is cool. So the first sort of like official question to you, Mob, that I'd like to ask is when was the last time or the last comment you left on something? Just real quick.
Ooh.
I think it was an open thread on what dog is the best dog to have. And clearly, the answer is Labradors.
Okay. I mean, it's actually bulldogs, so that's real cute.
I got told I was very boring for having Labradors as an opinion.
Awesome.
Well, I don't know. I can't remember. I mean, the only time I ever comment is like to tag somebody else in something and be like, look how ridiculous this is, or their dancing is fantastic. Like, I very rarely, I think the last time I commented on something like opinionated with an actual opinion was when somebody, well, I do remember somebody on my page, my public page, was like, how, essentially their comment was, how can you be a covered Muslim woman and show off your breasts on television? Right? And how do you expect us to focus on the stories when your breasts are so large? And I replied with like, thank you very much for acknowledging my breasts. And I hope that you watch the show again so that you can learn more about Australia and the stories around Australia. But I've just like never found commenting on anything ever changes anyone's opinion about anything.
Yeah, Yaz, I think I'm going to pull you up on something there. I think from memory, that dude said breast, like one breast.
He did. He only acknowledged one of my breasts.
How rude.
Let's touch on that as well. This, like, is it useful? Like, how do we respond? Is it useful to respond? Like, yeah, I think that's a really good point. What about you, Lane? When was the last time you put your opinions out there?
I think I'm not a big commenter in terms of, commenting on the actual article or even commenting on Facebook. Like, where I do most of my online talking and engaging is definitely on Twitter. So the one that comes to mind, the last time I kind of felt the need to send out a really opinionated tweet was in response to an article that Mark Kenny wrote about the same-sex marriage plebiscite and how I guess the basic point of the piece was the idea that LGBTI people and other people who oppose the plebiscite have made the wrong decision by opposing it because it's kicked same-sex marriage down the road so far. And I felt that piece, I kind of read it and had a very strong reaction in that I felt that the true kind of motives of much, not all obviously, but much of the LGBTI community in opposing the plebiscite had been really overlooked, and that it was kind of written in a way that implied that the community didn't understand the political implications of that decision. And I felt it was really important to point out that the LGBTI community is as capable as anyone of understanding the political implications of things. They just made a decision in this case that a lot of the political class don't agree with. So that's the last time I felt very, very compelled to actually kind of be like, I think this is wrong, and I want to say that this is wrong. But yeah.
Yeah, good on you. That was a train wreck.
I find that usually when I comment, apart from open threads about dogs, is defending writers that I've published against, stupid comments, not just stupid comments, but comments that have deliberately misread or are asking questions that are answered in the article. Do you know what I mean by that? And so I'm not offering my own opinion. I'm rather just pointing out, did you not read the entire article or did you just read the headline? And
paragraph 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really annoying to have to do that. And I try to stop myself because, well, you know what? Sometimes it really does change and people are surprisingly like, oh, okay, fair enough. And sometimes they don't bother to reply at all. But sometimes it can start like quite an interesting back and forth conversation, which in which we realise that we just disagree rather than, you know, actual, you know, loggerheads with each other. But that's, I've got to admit, very rare, unfortunately.
I mean, the nature of commenting tends to be like immediate dichotomies. Like, it is all about the loggerheads. People aren't interested in nuance. And I think that's part of the challenge, is like, you may put a first opinion out there, and that opinion may be, you know, your first articulation of it, or your first kind of, or one of your perspectives on it. You may be willing to be persuaded either way, but people don't view any opinion that you put out there as like an opinion in a moment in time. They view it as like, you are that thing, and like you are an embodiment of that opinion, as opposed to you have that opinion and you're willing to have a discussion about it. And so people, I feel, are broadly unwilling to sit in nuance and to actually, like, even, although to be fair, I think like the first time I was on Q&A, for example, I thought it was all going to be about asylum seekers, and it ended up being the election ended up being called the night before my show, and so it ended up being about the election and economics, and I know nothing about economics, and it was very evident that I knew nothing about economics, and I got quite pilloried on Twitter, right? And I went back on Twitter that night, and I was like, and everyone's like, you know, this girl's an idiot, who is she, blah, blah, blah. And I like tweeted back at people, I was like, hey, you're right. Like, I don't know anything about economics. What should I read? Like, help a sister out. And it was really interesting, because I think that was probably the only time in my life people have been like, oh, okay, we can engage with this person. Because almost every other situation, when you're talking about like social issues, be based around identity, people are very unwilling to have that, like, to be a bit more generous.
Yeah, you're so right. I think that would be really, did people actually respond and be like, go read Stephen, I don't even know.
Yeah, a couple of people did reply with recommendations.
These old white dudes, they know what they're on about.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it was interesting, because like a lot of it's that there's a great podcast somewhere, I can't remember what, where a woman, I think it's a This American Life one, where she actually goes out and meets her trolls, right? And like the disconnect. Yeah.
It's amazing.
That's kind of leads to a question I really want to ask. Like, actually, I'll ask my other question. What was the first time, or the first sort of mean or critical thing you ever read about your work, or a comment left on, or like a tweet at you, if you remember? I'll go first. Mine, so the first sort of like thing I ever wrote was for Vice early this year around constitutional recognition. And for Black people, or like First Nations people, Indigenous peoples here, often the critique centres on, instead of engaging with our ideas, they'll engage in our Aboriginality, or they'll like to dismiss our ideas. They'll say, oh, you know, she's a half caste, or she's like, you know, pretty much 3/4 white herself. So as though like my ideas couldn't be valid. So they'll attack my identity to attack my ideas. So that's like so a lot of the first critiques I ever read about myself was like how like I'm pretty much a white person. But also one that sticks out to me was just this guy who, this bitch needs an uppercut. I think that was one of the first I read. I was like, okay, sure. I'll take that advice on board. Sure. Yeah, so I'm just wondering if you three have any, like the very first one that was like, oh my goodness.
I remember the first time it wasn't the first bad comment, but the first time I ever wrote for The Guardian, and maybe that's the reason it stands out. There were like, I don't know, hundreds of comments, and I was reading them, and they were all like, you know, debating the issue, which was like, I don't know, about poverty or something. And then one said, oh, typical of The Guardian, the worst writing ever. What's wrong with this journalist or something? And I just, like, I was so upset. I cannot even tell you, because I'd put so much into it. It was my first article for The Guardian, and I was just so devastated. And it didn't matter that there were 200 other comments, like saying good things, and people were having discussions about whatever it was that I'd written about. It was just that one comment that was really stuck. And I've tried not to be that person that focuses on the negatives. Now I'm like trying to focus on the positives.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Lane and Yaz?
The one that comes to mind for me, again, not the first, but I had a lobby group, the Australian Family Association, I think it was, right, basically a takedown on a piece that I had written, kind of published a blog about it, going through it step by step, being like, this is why you're wrong, this is why you're wrong, this is why you're wrong. And I kind of was alerted to that article, I think, by someone on social media, and read it and just like completely freaked out about it. This was maybe, 6 months ago. And, it was just like, oh my God, they've gone to all this trouble and they've posted it and everyone's going to read it and everyone's going to think that I'm like really bad and unethical. And anyway, so I just freaked out kind of quietly on my desk for about 10 minutes. And then I called over my editor and was like, this lobby group has written this piece. And she kind of read it and was like, Lane, calm down. This is a very, hyper-partisan, hyper-ideological lobby group who are obviously unhappy with what you're written for reasons of their own that have nothing to do with your integrity or anything like that. And then I was kind of like, okay. But that was the first time, not the first time, but that was a time I remember really clearly when I just read it and I was like, wow, my career is over. And I think, a lot of that is probably down to my relative inexperience, but that's the time that happened.
Yeah, shout out to those bigots, love them. What about you guys?
I think mine's the same as you. Like, I think I've almost always, in fact, I would be kind of almost prefer it if people criticize my writing as opposed to what they do now, which is take my ideas down by taking my identity down. And from the very, very beginning, from the first time I did anything in the public space, I was probably about 16. People would like leave comments on us being like, oh, this Muslim this, and like they should leave the, she's like, either she's oppressed or she's a jihadi undercover or blah, 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 blah. Like, don't these people know, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember my mom made some comment about like, she'd Google me, and I was like, oh, I'll Google myself. So Google myself. I'm like 16 and I find all these like white supremacist websites that are like, how dare they like give this award to like this, like, all these like racial slurs and religious slurs and just had like photos of my face with, before like hateful memes were cool. And really just kind of realized that my identity was something that was always going to be an issue for people. And it meant that they wouldn't hear what I said, regardless of what it was that I said, right? And that was, I think that was like a reality that I became very comfortable with early on, but it wasn't until sort of this stuff happened recently with Lionel Shriver and for those who don't know, I walked out of this speech and then wrote about it and it kind of blew up. Gabrielle actually like facilitated quite a lot of the reach of that, which is awesome. And really grateful for the opportunity. But to then have people who are progressive thinkers who I thought would kind of agree, essentially tear me down and do the same thing. They would say, well, she's young, she hasn't written very much, she's a person, she's this like social justice warrior, she's this, and this, and go for the identity rather than the idea, or completely miss the point of what I was trying to say, which is just like the thing that frustrates me the most. I'm so willing to have an intellectual discussion. Just like listen to what I'm saying.
Yeah. You can't like, it's like what's the defense for you? You're just like, not all Muslims are bad, not all black people are bad. Like, is that the starting point? It makes me wonder though, like, if you're like a cis white dude, like, what do people comment on? Like, I've been thinking about this a lot. They must have the luxury of people engaging with their ideas rather than attacking their identity, or.
They totally do. It's true. Someone who publishes both men and women, and The Guardian did a big project this year called The Web We Want, where we analysed 70 million comments that have been left on The Guardian's website. And so we were able to analyse like who has the worst comments. And of the top 10 people with the most abusive comments, 8 were women and like I think one was a gay man and one was a black writer, a black man. And so it is, you know, there's no doubt that, you know, women, LGBTI and men and women of colour are more targeted for abuse. And it doesn't matter what they're writing about. If you belong to one of those categories, it doesn't matter what you're writing about, your identity will be attacked, you will be attacked personally, you know, in that kind of ad hominem way.
Yeah.
Even when men are writing about fashion, they get better engagement than women.
I write about motorsport and people are like, oh my God, didn't you know driving is like a white thing? Like you're culturally appropriating. I'm like, okay, sure.
You just can't. I think once you know that, once you kind of realise that people want to attack you because they want to shut you up, then it's so much easier to not worry about it.
Yeah, so contrary, I like really, I think you said like you prefer people engaging in your ideas, Gabrielle, before rather than the nastiness. I think I prefer the nastiness because like you can just dismiss it. You can be like, well, I'm sorry, like Joel, 24, who lives from Moorabbin, you know, you probably do think I need an uppercut, but you know, I can just be like, you're an idiot. But if someone's like, you know, this is your idea and I've thought critically about it and this is why it's wrong, that would make me like way more nervous because like then you're forced to actually think about it as opposed to like, you know, feel a bit crappy for an hour or so after, you know, Joel comments that you need to be punched. Yeah.
You're totally right. But I think that makes you a better writer.
Yeah.
Because I find now, since I started working at The Guardian, that I always write something and then I think, what are they going to comment on? And so I can find the like holes in my argument, or I can see if it doesn't go because I know what the people are going to say. So and that's for me, like you say, that is the most upsetting thing. If people disagree with me, fine. If they call me, someone once said, who cares what she says? She's got a face like a slapped ass. I mean, I don't even know what that means. But I replied saying, thanks for the compliment.
Like,
but yeah, if I've got a fact wrong or something, then that is really upsetting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you actually do something like not just piss off someone who, you know, is going to hate you anyway because you exist in the world as a black person or a woman or queer or whatever. I really want to get your opinions on who you think the people who leave comments are. Like, who leaves comments? Who are these people?
I guess I kind of find, kind of blending that with what you were just saying, Gabrielle, is that I find that the comments that I get tend to fall into three categories. One is, you know, abusive comments, the kind that you're just reading it and someone is just having a go at you because they want to have a go at you. It's like, you're clearly an idiot, like whatever. Then the other two groups are like a bit more complicated. You know, one group is people who actually want to have a genuine civil discussion with you, which is really rare. I fall into the camp of enjoying having those discussions, although like I'd be lying if I said they didn't like stress me out sometimes. But you know, on the whole, I do think they improve my work as a journalist and as a writer, and I think it's part of my job to have them. And then the other group is people who want to explain the things that you've written about back to you. And I think that all of us would have like a lot of experience with this. I can see you're nodding, Gabrielle. Yeah. So, and I think that those people are kind of often like well-meaning men, maybe kind of like age 20 through 60, who just have a lot of thoughts, kind of have a the notion in their minds that you have not grasped some essential element that you've just written a piece on, and feel really compelled to let you know and you know, help you in a way. Like I think a lot of it is well-meaning, if you can call mansplaining that. But those are kind of the three groups of people who I think, or at least who in my world, leave me comments and who interact with me. So
shout outs to those people. What about you, Yaz?
I mean, it's a really good question. I do wonder. Like, I think, like, I get like emails from people. Sometimes, like, they'll be pages long of like why they think that something that I've said is wrong, or why they think that my choices are wrong, or and so like they're obviously people with a little bit of time, or I mean, I genuinely think that what technology has allowed us to do is not actually, and this has been talked about time and time again, has allowed us not to necessarily see or have empathy for the person that we're necessarily commenting to, or we can say things without seeing the consequence, right? So you have a voice without the responsibility of having the voice, right? We feel like we're in this community without any of the responsibility of being in the community, or the kind of things that would make us be polite in a face-to-face community, right? Those social norms. So, so the kind of people I think that leave, I mean, I could broadly say, Anglo lads who are 15 to 40, but I have no idea. Like, I have no idea if that's what they actually are. I think that I'm sometimes surprised by the kind of people that have very dissimilar, or that take an opposing view and then turn that into an ad hominem attack. Like, well-meaning 50-year-old women who, I might bump into at the shops and have a lovely conversation about, like, the weather. But then if they read something that I wrote, they might have a completely different opinion. So to be honest, I'm not sure. And I'm, like, not curious enough to want to find out. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Like, I just find so little desire for engagement often in the kind of things that people comment on, that it's just like, I don't have the energy sometimes to engage. And it totally saps your energy as somebody who's putting ideas and content out. To have people attack you constantly, it's exhausting. Like, I know that anytime I'm on the drum, for example, like, I can expect at least 2 or 3 or 4 days of just, like, Twitter barrage, of just, like, constantly, like, minute after minute after minute of people just saying things. And you just can't deal with it. You're just like, you know what? I'm just going to go have a cup of tea and talk to some mates and disengage, because that's what ends up happening.
Yeah, totally. I do wonder, like, where does this compulsion for these people, I wonder, like, is that the most, so in this situation, if you're the writer, you're the one with the platform, and in some sense you have power there. And so for these people who leave comments, like, what are they hoping to achieve aside from bringing you down? And for those people, Joel for 24 from Moorabbin, is that the most powerful he's going to feel in the day? Like, is that, part of me feels sorry. Like, that is the most they will feel heard potentially, or the most that they'll have power in the day, like posting a triggered meme or something. Yeah.
I think you're onto something. I definitely think that you're right, I think that there are some really angry people, and that they actually go looking for articles about their pet topic, whether that's race or whether that's feminism or whether that's, gamers. I would say that the 4 topics that get the worst kind of abuse, anything to do with race is the worst by far. I now ask writers if they want the comments off, because I don't think that, especially people who aren't professional journalists and aren't used to dealing with that, I feel like we have a duty of care to protect them. So that's something that we've talked about a lot in The Guardian. So that's definitely our worst area. There was a time during the migrant crisis in Europe that we just turned comments on every single article that had anything to do with race off, because we felt that the site had been almost attacked by a group of racists who were shutting down all conversation. So we said, what's the point? It's not a productive conversation. Nothing productive or good is coming out of it, so we'll just stop it. And now we've been able to kind of turn them back on again. So there's race, feminism, and as I said, Gamergate, and also the new atheists for some reason. If you criticise new atheists, that's really, really passionate people. But I think that there are these people who have these issues. They're angry about, something, and they will wait for someone to publish an article that goes against their beliefs in order to just attack those people. And I do think they do it because they think there's a person of colour writing, why do they get to have that platform and I don't? And that's their way to feel powerful.
I'm just thinking maybe I'll write like a 5 best rooftop bars in Melbourne this summer and see if they're like, she's only half Aboriginal, what would she know?
I mean, it's an interesting one. I don't know if it's the moment that, like, and I would almost say it's the opposite. They don't necessarily feel the most powerful in the moment where they shoot off this message. To them, it's like not even that big of a deal. And it's like them just kind of reinforcing where they think their place is in society. Like, oh, I am the most important and my opinion is the most important. The way, and like you would squish a fly, like, oh, whatever, right? But like, and like when I think of the guys that I know that have the opinions that are similar to the kind of comments that I would see, they just don't even feel like they can't understand why anyone would challenge their authority in a way. Like they believe in their authority and their place so deeply that everything else just seems almost like unimportant to, like, it's, I don't know, it's a different type of expression of their power.
Because they don't think their opinions are opinions. They think their opinions are the truth.
Yes. Oh, nail on the head. Yes. It's that objectivity thing, that like white, male, cis objectivity. It's like, no. Your opinion is like biased because you're a brown Muslim woman. But I'm the one who's rational and unemotional and objective. And this is what is right.
I think there's a lot to be said around like the Western and kind of white canon seeing as itself as like the epicenter of the universe, and everyone else is like, we're the subject, we can't possibly be objective, or it's very, very interesting. Are there any, so like we've spent a lot of time running down the comments section, but are there any opinions or comments that you do actually care about or you do want to read, or can we learn from the comment section?
Well, just as I said before, I think when you read something that is actually a good criticism of your writing and you think, I should have thought of that, I should have addressed it, you're right, I was wrong, I feel like then it can make you a better writer. And even though it's so painful to sift through the comments, sometimes, I wrote last summer about the Women's World Cup, soccer World Cup, and like my first paragraph was how I don't know anything about football, and even though I lived in London for 9 years where everyone supports it, I still never learned anything until this World Cup because it was like so fun to watch. And still there were like, I don't know, 1,500 comments, and half of them were telling me I didn't know anything about football. I'm like, but I already said that about myself. Like you can't like tell me that. I already know. But I think so there are those which I can just dismiss, but then there were people who, like in other articles do have something good to say and will make me think more carefully before like thinking I've finished that and it's ready to be published the next time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that definitely does. What about you, Lane? Lane, you've been a bit quiet there.
I think I definitely think that we can learn from the comments, and that the comments can be useful spaces. I think as from like what you have both said, and from like other writers who are people of colour who I know, it is, I think, much more difficult for them to be able to get people to separate their identity and their opinions than I personally have found it, which I think, makes me very lucky, obviously. That said, like with that kind of knowledge, I think any conversation in which, you know, lies into that category that I was talking about earlier, people who actually are willing to just engage in a conversation with you, can be really good and really fruitful. What I would say, I guess, is that the people I listen to the most when it comes to comments and feedback on my stories are, because as I said, I write mostly about the LGBTI community, obviously people in that community, and obviously people from parts of that community who I don't personally identify with, like bisexual people, transgender people, intersex people. You know, if I'm writing their stories, then I have a real, I think, obligation, not just an interest in listening to how they feel I am telling their stories, and to be able to tell them in a way that is true and is respectful and all those kinds of things. So I guess they're the people that I would listen to the most in terms of reading the comments. But I do think that anyone who's willing to engage in a kind of respectful and civil way, I can learn from.
Yeah, cool. What about you,
I think
Alex?
that's a really great point. It's like, who are you writing for? And like, and they kind of on board. Like if I wrote an opinion piece that was like, as a woman of color, I think that, and then all women of color, and you were like, yes, and what was that about? Like, that's so not okay. Then, like, because I I mean, I guess it's the opinions of people I respect and the opinions of people that I think are valuable, that I would really kind of, would be my barometer almost. And you do kind of, I guess it's and Lane, you kind of split the different types of commenters before. You know, completely dismissing obviously all the kind of the random, belligerent, nasty comments. Most people will have, like, if they have a contention, does he the way that you've presented, the thing that you've presented, or that I've presented, that people are finding challenging. So it's like identifying whether the thing they're finding challenging is the point I'm making, or is it something that I need to take into account. Also, like, authority doesn't come with, you know, a masthead. So if someone in the Australian disagrees, or someone in, like, you know, in another kind of media platform disagrees, just because they come from a place of authority doesn't necessarily mean they're right either. And so it's about kind of saying, do we share values, or do I think we share values, and evaluating from there. But I mean, I always have, like, my parents and a couple of friends that I like, if the backlash is particularly strong, then I'll just be like, hey, do you think that, you know, this is kind of in the right, have I gone off in the wrong direction here? Like, am I presenting a view that's actually not aligned with the values that we share?
Yeah, definitely. I think I agree with all of you. For me, it's like, because blackfellas or Indigenous peoples or First Nations people here, we barely have any visibility, and you could probably, like, count on maybe 10 fingers, like, the really prominent opinion writers or, you know, public people. So there's probably a sense of responsibility that doesn't exist as much for, not necessarily for other marginalised people, because I'm sure you feel it, Yaz, perhaps that sense of responsibility that comes with being visible. But yeah, definitely. Dominant groups of people don't have that responsibility. So, and I think you touched on it as well, Wayne, that, like, responsibility to your community. So first and foremost, I really care about what my mob is saying. They're like, if they're on board, or if they're like, hey, have you thought about this or whatever, then that's, like, the most important thing. I mean, you're never going to please everyone, even in your own communities. Like, we are not a homogenous block. None of us, you know, queer communities or whatever, we're not all on the same page with stuff, and that's totally okay. Yeah, but first and foremost, the people you're writing about. But even then, like, with intersectionality, I wrote this, like, thing about feminism a few months ago that pissed a lot of Black feminists absolutely got their lives from this piece, but a lot of like non-Black feminists thought that I shouldn't have written the way that I did, or perhaps that I was being divisive. So that, yeah, it's a hard one because your identities can be multiple and you're going to please everyone. So it is really hard. You touched on something as well there, Yaz, kind of like the self-care or the checking in. Like how, when things are particularly nasty, how do you three look after yourselves?
Yeah, I think it's probably something that I used to, it's really funny. Well, it's really great to see the concept of self-care be something that's like talked about. And I don't know whether it wasn't talked about 5-10 years ago. It definitely wasn't in my world 5 to 10 years ago. Maybe, you know, the world I was in wasn't one that was welcoming to that. I spent more time around engineers than anything else. But having a group of people around you, or even just one person around you who you totally trust, who's aligned with your values, and will essentially like give you unconditional love. Like I think in times when you're under attack, you don't necessarily want to engage with the intellectual discussion. You just want someone to say, hey, you know what? You know, you're safe. I think you're amazing. Let's go do something different. Like, and completely move away from that, because like I think when I'm in that mid stage of like, you know, there are haters, but I'm not like too kind of emotionally involved. I do want to engage intellectually. I do want to kind of like make the argument better and so on and so on. But it gets to a point where you're just like, you know what, I'm out. And I'm just going to hang out with my friends and watch Netflix. And that's, I think, okay, right? Like, or whatever self-care looks like. A lot of people say that their self-care is exercise related. I'm like, look, that's great, but sometimes I just don't have the energy for it.
Yeah, I mean, good for you if you want to go for a jog, but maybe some of us want to have like a lot of cream.
Full of wine.
Yeah, well, you and
that's just me, sorry.
actually, yeah. Blow off some steam, am I right? What about you, Lane and Gabrielle? Like, Lane, when you had that piece written by those bigots, like, how did you look after yourself? Like, what was the process after?
I guess when stuff like that happens online, I feel like in the kind of 2 years I've been working for BuzzFeed, and I came straight to BuzzFeed out of uni, so I'm, you know, by no means seasoned. I think even in the short time that I've been working in this industry, my skin has gotten so much thicker. Like I can even remember back to, you know, my first few months in the job, if someone criticized my piece even mildly, I would go home and just be so upset and be like, I'm so bad, I'm never going to make it. You know, I really let it get me down. And then the more you kind of engage with that stuff, the more you realize that every time it happens, you learn again that it's not the end of the world. So I guess the way I deal with it is, yeah, just a combination of my skin getting a bit thicker. I'm hoping in like 5 years' time it's going to be so thick. And also just pretty standard stuff. Like I am actually one of those annoying people who kind of get a lot of negative energy out by running. So I like go to the gym. I will hang out with my cats. I will just log off. Yeah, really quite standard. Just trying to tap out of it a bit and give my mind a bit of a break from the whirl of Twitter and comments and news all the time and stuff like that.
Yeah. What about you, Gabrielle?
Yeah, I mean, you do get a thick skin, and it does get thicker and thicker. And also, you know, I actually think I'm really lucky, and I know as a person who publishes a lot of different people, that I don't have it anywhere like a quarter as bad as other people. So I am constantly grateful for that and constantly looking for ways to protect other people. But I'm also really good at turning Twitter off and turning Facebook off and not reading the comments. Like, I just think, why torture myself? So I don't, I turn it all off and I do something else that's going to make me happy. But I think, as you've all touched on something, yeah, sometimes I go to yoga, you know, sometimes I just need to talk to someone who knows me and who'll reassure me that I haven't done the worst thing in the world by writing that piece. And as I said before, it's always, I'm most upset when, you know, it's something I wrote in an hour and then put up, and then I was like, oh, I would have written it differently if I had like half a day. And, you know, that's when you get more upset. But I always can see from the comments on other people that I publish that this isn't the worst, that these people are coming here to make me feel bad. And, you know, I don't know if we can swear, but fuck them.
Yeah, basically, like, get a life. Go start your own blog.
Exactly.
Isn't it funny the price we pay? Like, it's just, I was thinking about it the other day. It's like, we dare to have opinions, and we dare to put, you know, to have a voice, and we like, and all the people I know that have public presences and that write and are journalists and so on are just so used to the fact that they have to have thick skin, and that they have to accept people, you know, saying that they want to kill them or uppercut them or, you know, rape them or whatever. And like, and that's normal for us now. Like, we've gotten to a point where someone tweeting me a rape threat is like a normal thing, right? And like, it's just so, when people tell me that the world is equal, I'm like, no. Because like, like, because this is the price we pay, and it's definitely a lot better than like being lynched, but it's still something that has some
like,
level of
is that
attached.
It's like, oh, you know, back in the days, if you were an uppity black, you'd just be killed. But, you know, now I just get the casual rape threat, and how good is the rape?
We ask for too much, Yuka. We ask for too much.
But seriously, you know, it's something that I struggle with. I've said this before as an editor, like having this duty of care. I think Jessica Valenti once described it as like, imagine, you know, if all you cis white men out there, imagine that you had to go to work, and on your way to work, you had to go through a crowd of people, and they were all yelling at you, you're shit at your job, you're horrible, you're ugly, and that's how you started your work day every day. Like, that's what it's like for some people to work as a journalist or to have opinions in the public sphere.
Like, for us, the thing people don't understand is, like, you know, for them, it's like one shitty, like, poorly phrased, badly spelt piece of crap paragraph, or like a really bad meme. Like, that's one thing that they're going to do in the day. But for us, it's like, I'm 26, so it's like 26 years of like systemic oppression, plus like microaggressions, plus like not being able to get cabs. Then I have to log on and read your shitty comment. Like, it's not just a comment, it's like, no, this is like an ongoing system. This is an ongoing structure. Anyway, that was just me whinging. But I think
it's really important that you say that and continue to say
I'm not whinging. That's really important.
Yeah, exactly. You're not whinging. This is a really valid thing to say, and it's a really valid question to ask whether the comments are still a good thing. I don't know the answer to that yet.
Like, it can be really nice to like read like pos stuff, like, yeah, this is cool, or I don't know, I agree. I don't know what the positive ones look like, but yeah, good ones.
Thanks for making me change my mind.
You know what?
That's always a fun. That's the best, when you're like, whoa, a plant seed.
I remember one day on Twitter, someone said, oh, you stupid bitch or something, I can't remember. And I said, oh, well, that's not very nice, is it? And he wrote back saying, you know what, you're right, I'm really sorry.
That has happened to me maybe 2 or 3 times as well. And every time I'm so startled. I'm just like, oh, well, sometimes just asking people to be more polite, it can work. Maybe once a year.
The campaign for politeness.
I like to sometimes just have a bit of a lull. Like, so a critique I got for the first thing I wrote, like, it was quite sweary, which, if you know me, is just a part of my personality. And so a lot of the critiques I got were just like, you know, she's got a point, but I just wish she wouldn't swear so much. So for those ones, like there was only one time I commented, and it was a friend's uncle wrote on it, and he was like, "She shouldn't swear." Blah, blah, blah. He was like much older, and I was just like, "Lol," and that was pretty satisfying. Something I don't know if any. Actually, yeah, maybe this is something you have, like kind of comment related, but something I've been noticing more and more is particular family members actually kind of, when people you're really close to disagree with your work. So I have kind of family who aren't on board with some of the stuff that I write and get real offended. And yeah, just wondering if you have any experiences of when it's really close to you and people like, you're a reverse racist or whatever.
Yeah, I have that happen to me recently. Actually, I mean, after my most recent writing about cultural appropriation, that kind of thing, a few boys from uni who were really good friends of mine when I was at university, and whose opinions I really respected, and we had I spent 4 years on the daily with these blokes, essentially being like, Yasmin, what is, I know it's not family, but essentially they were like, hey, what is this? When we were at uni, we were all one and none of this stuff mattered, and now you're just being really divisive and you're making issues out of nothing, and this wasn't who you are, and that kind of thing. And intellectually I was like, no, but at the same time it's like, oh, that's my phone, sorry. These are people that I really cared about and opinions that I really valued across a number of things. But now they hadn't grown with me, I guess, and that was really sad, because I think I've definitely grown a lot in the last few years, right? I've become more woke, as it were, right? Different journeys and kind of, yes, and realizing that not everyone has gone on that journey with me, and not everyone is even interested in that journey was a hard thing. And I think particularly when you're growing, or when your kind of environment is changing, and when you're advocating for stuff, and the people around you can find that hard to kind of keep pace with.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Wayne?
I feel like I don't have this as much as perhaps you guys do, because I write primarily news, not opinion. So when people, people who are close to me, I'm not talking random people on the internet, have discussions with me about my work, it's more often couched in this thing you wrote about than this opinion you have. But I mean, I don't know, it's always hard when someone you really respect thinks you're really wrong on something, because it's so much easier to internalize that as some kind of value judgment about who you are and the values you hold and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that I can recall any particularly awful moments of that with me though. There's obviously been discussions with people I'm close to who I disagree with, but nothing that's really left me feeling awful about myself, I guess.
Yeah. What about you, Gabrielle?
Yeah, I grew up in a family where I often left the dinner table in tears, screaming at them all that they didn't understand me. And that still happens. But I think recently something really interesting happened. I wrote this piece in The Guardian about sexism. I can't remember, something happened. Oh, just another day in Australian politics, a lot of sex. It was when someone called Samantha Maiden a witch, and it was something footballing. I can't remember. Anyway, I wrote, here's a set of rules for you guys who don't understand. And I was kind of half in jest, right? And one of the rules was, are you thinking about touching a female colleague at work? Don't. Right, which I thought was pretty clever. And then I had so many emails and Facebook messages from men I know asking my advice on, but what if you're really good friends with a woman from work? Can you touch her? Like, I
Oh, wow.
sometimes hug my friends at work, like, what if they think I'm flirting with them? And I was just like, oh my God, this is just, you know what? Yeah. How do I know if I'm being sleazy or a friend? I'm like, if you need me to tell you if you're being sleazy or just you have a friend who is a woman, then you should just keep reading that list over and over again. Then you should not touch the person ever.
Like consent, like you having to break down consent and like norms. That's just, people are weird. So we've got like 5 minutes left, and I've kind of been following Twitter and can't, like, there's meant to be like a question thing that I can't particularly see on my thing. Who's in charge here? But I was just wondering if any of you kind of had, maybe for any young people, like really young people who might be tuning in, if you could leave with any sort of, I don't know, any sort of advice or any last thoughts. We might go Yaz. Actually, yeah, we'll go Gabrielle, Wade, and Yaz. Cool.
For really young writers, I just would say don't read the comments. I just don't think it's worth it at this point.
I guess I would say, a lot of the stuff that we've covered already, make sure you have people around you who you really trust to be kind to you and honest with you, to kind of bounce your opinions off and stuff like that. If you're getting really, really nasty stuff, just log off, go do something else. You don't need to be the target of that. And I'd also say always be open to the possibility that you're not right. And that's obviously not in the case when you're getting abused or anything like that. But, when you're putting opinions out there and people are willing to kind of engage with them, just always be open to that possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important, actually, Len. I think it's important to recognize that all our opinions are just that, opinions, and they're and quite often who gets to say what is the one truth, right? Like, I think it's very it's totally subjective, and we live in a world where truth doesn't mean anything or doesn't mean the same thing it used to. So having an open mind and being willing to be challenged, but always recognizing that you have, I think this is the thing that I want to leave people with, is you have a legitimate voice and you have the right to be in a space, right? And so don't ever let anyone tell you that you shouldn't speak or that you shouldn't write or that you shouldn't exist in a space, because that is how oppression happens, is by silencing, right? And if people of all different groups that are marginalized and oppressed, if we allow ourselves to if we allow ourselves to be silenced, and if we are fearful of the backlash that is going to happen. I mean, I think Nayuka said this great thing once that I just love, Black women are tough not because we like being tough, but because the world has made us tough. And I think, yes, the reality is that it is going to be difficult and there are going to be things that are hurtful and challenging and so on. But be generous with your voice in the sense that go out and speak, but also go out and be willing to engage. But never let somebody else take your voice away from you. I think the world is moving too fast for us to sort of stand back and say somebody else is going to fix it.
Yeah, I think the world needs more, I feel like part of the reason why people comment is because maybe they recognize there's a new world coming, and that, there's more different voices being heard. So part of me is like, it's kind of a good thing that we've got people's backs up, because if they were comfortable, maybe they wouldn't. Yeah, we're making people uncomfortable, which is a good thing. But in a world where we've got Andrew Bolt and people like Alan Jones as the most read and most listened to people, it's so important that I'm like, if that old dude can be the most read guy, then literally I can have any opinion on anything and I'm going to try and do it. So put it out there. If you do, it's human nature to read the comments. I know we say don't read the comments, but you're going to, because you want to know how people are receiving your work. but like, it's not the end of the world if someone disagrees with you. You're allowed to change your mind as well. Like you are not anything you wrote. You are absolutely entitled to changing your mind. Politicians do it all the time. So you're not fixed in what you've written. So just write heaps, be loud, take up space. That's what I've got. It looks like it's 4 p.m. So what happens from here? Digital writers.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was a really interesting discussion.
Yeah. Had a great time.
Yeah.
That was fun.
And I also just want to say one last thing. Yasmin's article that she wrote for about Lionel Shriver got a bigger audience than Andrew Bolt could ever hope for. So it can happen.
I knew Yasmin.
Yeah.
Nothing like accidentally picking fights with important people.
A memoir.
All right, yeah.
All right. How do we sign out? My goodness. Do we just